going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your movie podcast for reboots, remakes, sequels, and everything else that's been churned out again and again and again. As always, I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And this week we are diving into the long-awaited Beetlejuice sequel, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, which I suppose means the third one would need to be a live action. He's out there somewhere doing an
Like in
event.
the real world. Yeah. It's a pop-up version of Beetlejuice just randomly showing up in places.
Another long-awaited legacy sequel that had hundreds of different versions of this in development between Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii.
Hawaii.
I think that was the main one. I can't remember how many others that were circling around.
That was the one that was on the books for like a long time. Back before the internet, like internet was really big. That was the one that was on like a lot of chat message boards. Like, oh, Goes Hawaii. And I guess there was a script pretty much done, and everybody was like, no, this isn't it. We're not doing this.
No. Yeah, it sounds like an episode of the animated series. That seems like something we would do there with none of the original people back. What did you think of it, Terrence?
It's funny. I feel like Beetlejuice and Ghostbusters, I'm going to use their references a lot together. They're a lot alike in their like legacy sequel-ness. And I feel like a lot of people hold those movies up in high regard, as they should. They're classics. But a lot of the middle work that has existed that has made these legacy sequels work so long is like the cartoons or animated stuff or video games. It's only really like one or two films, and then everybody remembers these things growing and becoming more out of the animated years. And so I feel like this movie, a lot like the last Ghostbusters movie, is that sort of hybrid between an animated episode and a live action movie. I had fun. Let me stay with the good stuff. I had a lot of fun with this movie. From top, I never stopped smiling. There's never a point where I was like, oh, I'm getting bored. Catherine O'Hara and Michael Keaton are both on firing on all cylinders, and there was never a moment where I was like, I'm just happy to be back in this world. It looks good to see some practical effects again. It looks good to see that Tim Burton sort of getting a little bit more edgy stuff after like years of doing family oriented Tim Burton. This was a little bit, not fully on. And so those things I enjoyed. What sort of happens though? So the Beetlejuice fan enjoyed this movie. The person who enjoys movies, there are some issues that I kind of had with the movie overall. Namely, there's about 5 or 6 storylines that happen in this movie, and they don't really coalesce or have any ending. Or if they do have an ending, it's so abrupt and quick that I'm wondering why we slow walk the dog to get there. I think the biggest one is sort of Astrid and her boyfriend, which I can see I think we both saw the writing on the wall immediately of what he was and that he was dead. We didn't get the sort of the fact that he's a mass murderer piece until a little bit later, but like those pieces were seen, and then we spend 35 minutes on that character to then get into the another world, and he's just wiped away like, oh, never mind, that's not a piece of the story. And then we have the Monica Bellucci character, all of these things. They have the Willem Dafoe character, and they're all fun separately. But when you put them all together and how quickly we run through them, kind of just like, well, what was the point of all of this other than just saying, hey, we're just having a good time? And if that's all we're doing, cool. But as a story, it kind of leaves a little bit to desire. So when I walked away from this, I was like, I enjoyed the movie. I had a lot of fun, but I kind of kept saying, eh. And I will say, I don't really know, other than saying, hey, we're doing Beetlejuice again, I don't really know why we came back to this. Because there's a bit of a newness and there was some vulgarity that there was a little bit more edge to the original Beetlejuice. This one feels a little bit more tamer, and it kind of keeps asking, other than, hey, remember, I don't know why we're fully coming back to this world again.
Yeah, I think that is very astute, because I agree. I enjoyed the ride, and I think sometimes when we get into these legacy sequels and even sequels and things in general, we end up sort of just being like, the fun part is being in the world. And there's so many times where that's correct, because I really enjoyed going back to the underworld, seeing the Soul Train, watching Tim Burton really like go full Tim Burton-y in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, and watching Michael Keaton play that role and going back to the house and hearing the song play. And those are all very fun, charming moments. But when you sort of like wash an IP off of a movie, I feel like you have to ask, does this still work?
Right.
And I think it's a similar problem that some like Marvel and TV shows have even had on Disney Plus, where I'm like, well, if we take away the IP here, I don't really want to watch this Secret Invasion show. If I
Right.
remove what I know, then why am I here?
Yeah.
And you're right. When you do that, if you wipe away the Beetlejuice of this, you're sort of stuck with a like mother daughter story where she can see ghosts and has explained none of this to her daughter, a trickster demon returning, and his ex wife reattaching herself and like Terminator 3 villain style walking through the movie to get to him. Really reminded me of Men in Black 2 and Terminator 3, where I was like, oh, cool. We made the female villain, and we've just decided that instead of having any agency or speaking, she'll just walk through everything.
Yeah.
It felt very 2003 where we did that.
Yeah.
Um, and we have to kind of think of the like, how do we raise the stakes for the undead people? Like, well, no, she takes the soul though, so you're like
Hmm.
dead, you know,
Right.
which is
Uh,
always a weird stretch.
it is a weird stretch, and and I was like, cool. It gives some agency to her, but then we lose her for a good 30 minutes of the film. She just goes away, and so it's kind of like if the impetus is that she's going after Beetlejuice, there should have been some type of, just for me as a non-Beetlejuice fan, let's say if I'm not and I'm watching this as a film, there should be at least at one point where Beetlejuice and she meet before the finale, and it doesn't happen, and it's weird for her to be this big person. Like, I want to get revenge on him, especially when you think about, I love it, but the backstory that they have, they only knew each other for a day. And so they're really a weird sort of like, I want revenge on him for killing me. I get that piece, but you guys don't have that much interaction outside of that one day. And so for me to watch an entire film and you chasing this person down, there needs to be at least some other type of interaction between the two of you. And then we don't get that until the very end, where it's like, well, this is too late. Everything's already ending.
Yeah, and I think that's where the movie sometimes gets bogged down, because even Willem Dafoe on this who done it, but we know who did it cat and mouse game that doesn't really feel like a cat and mouse game. I kept forgetting he was in the movie. And we'd come
Yeah.
back and I'd be like, oh, yeah, right. He's following her and doing the fun, like, I'm an actor who was a detective. And that's a very fun game for this to play.
Nice bit. Yeah.
And so it really is funny because when you go back to the first Beetlejuice and like what made it work and what made it popular, I think you obviously have Michael Keaton and Tim Burton and this insane trickster demon. But when you sort of like get a little bit deeper, it is still a movie of like a family and parental figures and these deceased people who are being a better parental figure than her living
Hmm.
parents and reconciling that and this idea of moving on into the afterlife and what it looks like. And they do a lot of fun games with that, whether it's like waiting for the ticket or him being insane and all of the other weird like trickster stuff. And when you get here, we sort of try to do that theme again with Jenna Ortega and her mom. And it just, because she like leaves and meets this boy so quickly, we lose a lot of that. Because I
We do.
really liked the setup of like, she's like traumatized and doing this ghost show, and her producer boyfriend is awful
Just
in
using her. Right.
the most like modern awful way, where he knows all like the right therapy terms and all of the right things to say and is just using them like
Hmm.
in the most manipulative fashion. Like, I laughed so hard when he was like, "Oh, you know, I hate seeing you like this because I'm empathetic and it makes me hurt. So when you're sad, it's almost like you're hurting me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is great. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to see him do more of this nonsense." But then again, we don't connect that anywhere. We don't really get the family back together and aligned until the very end, when it sort of is just this rocket fire like,
Like we're
I'm sorry, mom, I
speaking.
didn't know who you were. I didn't know it was serious. This guy's trying to do this to me and I need help. Like, we don't have
Yeah.
any moments where they bond or love each other, or like we don't do any of the fun games like having her float and sing. We don't really take those
Yeah.
beats. We get very focused on all the other disorientating elements around us. And so it feels more like, instead of an A story, a B story, and a C story, it feels like I'm watching 3 episodes of a TV show that are
Hmm.
all trying to have an A story.
Yeah.
And all of
It's
them
very
are
much the
interesting on
way
their own. Like,
it is. And it's very much the way that, excuse me, the animated series used to work, where it's like, I'm going to do an A, B, and C story. And then like, we'll sort of come together. And like, that's fine in 30 minutes because we know sort of what we're getting in animated form. But when you're doing a live action, especially when the front half of this movie takes its time, like it is really deliberate of like we're going to show her producing, we're going to show the family, we're going to show this, we're going to go we're doing all these beats, and we'll intersperse a little bit of Monica getting back together. I mean, putting her body parts back together, but it's still this is the story, and then we're just kind of like unevenly going faster than hell in the back half of this film. You're like, well, hold on. That's jarring how quickly we got from one to the other. So there's a pacing sort of unevenness that happens in addition to that, trying to combine all those stories. I think identity too is the big piece of what was sort of important in that first one. And it feels like they try to do that a little bit here, but because it's repeating and rehashing some of the same things that sort of Lydia went through, it just doesn't work or it gets dropped. And like, well, she's an oddball too, but never mind that. We're just going to move on and keep going. And yeah, there's nothing that has sort of a heartbeat. That's the main thing that's missing. Like it's all fun and it looks cool to be a part of this ride, but there's no heartbeat that I can sort of attach myself to. It's like, that is why we're here. That is the point of this. That's what I walk out of this movie feeling good. Because when that first one ends, you feel like, okay, at the very least, with that family being stuck in that house and whatnot, Lydia at least now knows who she is. And so for this one, I walk out, I'm like, I don't know anything about anybody. Like no one. I
Yeah,
guess
no
people have
one.
grown. Lydia and Astrid are together, sort of, but they don't even really earn that.
Catherine O'Hara almost has the best
She has the best
ending
arc.
and
Yeah,
arc.
she has
Like
the best arc.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting that sort of is the most like cathartic
Hmm.
moment of like them getting to reunite and get on this train and leave together. And
Which is probably
uh
why her character is the one that stood out the most. Like when I said that's who I attach to the most, because she does have a beginning, middle, and end to this. Even as insane as it is. Yeah, I think that's why I attached to her the most, because I felt like there was something new gained by her.
yeah, and it and then there were just little weird things. Like even the logic of the Beetlejuice rules sort of started to be like, well,
Oh,
could
saying
his
the name. Yeah.
ex-wife just summon him? Or could like
Yeah.
or now we're sort of like Catherine O'Hara doesn't finish it. Some people are
Right.
sort of doing it. And I was like, well, now we're sort of muddling up some of how this works. And as a result, we're sort of also muddling up what he's
Yeah.
trying to do. Cause like he goes back to the like, well, if I marry her, I can stay. And then we like make
Right.
it the deal so that they'll help Jenna Ortega and like that kind of works. But it also felt weird that he never was like, oh, I need someone to help me this time.
Right.
And then for
It's
that climax to be like, just take this guy instead who you don't know was very
right.
odd to me.
It's weird that there's so many times in this where they're just like, script wise, I need to get out of this corner that we sort of backed ourselves into. So we're just gonna say a line and move on. Like the whole family being the Baldwin, Gina Davis family not being a part anymore. Understandably, they've aged, so it'd be weird to have them, but they're just like, oh, there's a loophole. And we just drop that. I'm like, cool, we don't even get to sort of understand what that loophole, which is weird considering how important that family was to the making of who Lydia is and that house being a piece of it. So we're gonna throw away. But then you get at the end, Astrid, with the whole signing of the document, you would think that Beetlejuice being a purveyor of this world would understand that he there was a loophole in the line, but it's just a quick throwaway, like, nope, you did this and this and this, so that contract's null and void. It's just a lot of things that happen where we sort of get back into a corner, and then something happens that makes it so easy to get out of. You're like, well, there's no real threat or weight to anything that's happening.
Yeah, it's all very quick. Like even when we drop the bad boyfriend down into hell, and it's just like up, like it almost was like blink and you miss it, and we're done with that. It was a
Right.
very it's so interesting because everything in the first one is so deliberate and has purpose and has
Hmm.
an objective to it, and this sort of just kind of has a like it's like it's just vibes, like we're just having a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah.
And it does kind of make you be like, well, why did we make this? This doesn't really feel like we found a reason that's relevant to like 2024 or whatever year it is. It doesn't
Right.
really feel like we figured out something to do else with this character. It doesn't feel like we're expanding anything. It really kind of has that like, well, we've been trying to do this for a long time and the timing's
We finally,
here. And
we finally got it done. So here you go.
which is a
There you
shame
go,
because
guys.
like
Thanks.
the technical aspects of it are great. All of the actors are
Hmm.
fantastic. All of the cinematography and production design and costumes and everything you expect to be there visually is there.
It's
And
there.
like it's very fun to see Willem Dafoe be this like wacky character. And it's
Yeah.
very fun seeing Danny DeVito in the beginning. And then you just sort of walk out and you're like, All right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I will say that it's pretty cool to see the father, because of the personal stuff that's happened in his life. That actor can't be used, understandably so. He's a terrible human being. But I love how amazing they were to kind of like, we're going to honor the dad, but the actor, we're just going to outright remove your face. Like you're
Yeah,
not
that
here.
was
The
a that
easiest way
was
to
a
do that is like that's a very smart way to implement that with keeping it within the line of what Beetlejuice is.
that was a much cleverer way of doing that than getting rid of the host in the house and be like, they're gone.
Yeah,
They're gone.
yeah, exactly. So it's like that's my thing. Is like you if you take a little bit of time, you can get there if you think about it. But they chose one way to like, oh, we're just gonna write them out, and it's very simple.
But I mean,
It sucks.
clearly, yes. Yeah, it is unfortunate. But clearly everyone wanted this movie because it is
Oh
making
yeah.
just so much money.
I mean,
Just
look, we're 30. It's the third highest grossing film this year, behind Deadpool and Wolverine and the Pixar Inside Out 2,
Inside
which
Out
is
2.
just insane. Those are legacy. Those, I mean, those are two legacy films. Two, there's a sequels, but this is one that has like, there's an ingrained 36-year, 3 decade worth of folks up in here, and like it crosses generations. And so there's a lot of people who have been holding out hope and waiting for this. And let me be perfectly clear. As a film person, we're nitpicking a little bit because of the script. If you're just a Beetlejuice fan, like my wife is a huge Beetlejuice fan, she walked out, I was like, I had a great time, I loved it. I think that's what they made that for. They're like, oh, we're gonna go back to the ballpark and play around in this sandbox one more time and then get out of here. We're never going to do this again because it'll be like 100 by the time Tim Burton does another
Well,
one
I
in 30
mean,
more
we
years.
say that now, but
Warner Brothers might be
$110
like,
million
hey,
dollars. Yeah.
like, hey, here's a truck. What do we
Yeah.
have to do to get Tim Burton and Michael Keaton back to that saddle? But yeah, I think the audience was there for this. I think this is going to be one. There are going to be a lot of like Beetlejuice is one of those movies that every Halloween it gets put back up on like cemetery blogs to watch. They watch this in the park. This is going to be one of those films. Now they're going to A and B it. They're going to put them together and say, hey, let's
Oh,
just stay for
yeah.
the whole hour. And I think that's what the feeling that you're going to get out of these Beetlejuice runs from now on. And it serves that purpose for the fans. It feeds them, which I think is half the battle.
Yeah. Which is fine. It's
Yeah.
one of the few things we only had one of for a long time.
Yeah, correct. And yeah, because even Ghostbusters at least already had two before it stopped. So yeah, I think it's good to see Tim Burton sort of have a little bit more edge to him, a little bit more bite. But I don't I can tell you that this doesn't hold the same value to me as the original does, but it's a cool little B story, if you will, to sort of
Yeah,
continue on.
I would agree. I think that's our show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Terrence, for recording in this awful heat wave we're in.
It's stupid.
It's so bad. It's just awful. But you can leave the show a review on the podcast. You can comment on our YouTube channel. Hollywood already did it. We're at Hollywood ADI on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at As Always Blake, and Terrence is at Terrence Tatum. And our YouTube channel has all of Terrence's trailer reactions and TV show reviews. It's so hot that I almost can't even keep all this straight. And we will see everybody next time because I know there's
Yes.
nothing next week.
No.